Hi, it's Pastor Andy, and I'm going to encourage you, if you want to take down some verses, I encourage you to pause the video right here and get a pen or a pencil and some paper, because I'm going to be giving you a few verses, especially as I begin this today. Today I'm going to be talking about different terms that the Bible uses for leadership, primarily in the New Testament. There's many terms in the Old Testament as well, but I'm primarily going to stick with the New Testament because we are living in New Testament times, so to speak. So yesterday's message was about the idea of elders, and that term really comes from one primary word, but there's a couple of other words that relate. So in the New Testament, especially in the book of Acts, we have this term elders used quite often. The Greek word is presbyteri, which is where we get the word presbyter or the denomination Presbyterian from. And just to give you some of those verses I mentioned a moment ago, you can find this throughout Acts, but Acts chapter 11, verses 29 through 30, chapter 14, verse 23, chapter 15, verse 2, and 4 and 6, so 15 verse 2, 15 verse 4 through 6, and 15, 22 and 23. Also Acts 16:4 and James 5:14. Let me repeat those one more time. Acts chapter 11 verses 29 through 30, Acts 14:23, Acts 15:2, Acts 15:4 through 6, Acts 15:22 through 23, Acts 16:4, and James 5:14. Now, in the Old Testament, there were men who were selected as elders, and basically they were brought in to represent various segments of the tribes, because the tribes were very large, and later those tribes turned into districts. So we find in Exodus that, in the districts we find in 1 Samuel chapter 8, for instance. In the New Testament, we have the word elders being used of the Sanhedrin, which consisted of 23 elders, and that group interpreted the law of Moses, applied the law of Moses, and punished those who did not. The Great Sanhedrin was the group of 70. We find this term in Luke chapter 22, verse 66, where Jesus was before the Sanhedrin. And so what Paul and Peter and others did was they took a term that the people understood as the religious leaders of the day, the Sanhedrin, and incorporated it into the church as those who would be leading the church, with the distinction that punishment is not what is meant to happen. Now, as time went on, and as Paul went into other locations and began to plant more churches, the idea of overseer became important. And so this word is overseer or bishop is the Greek word episkopoi, from which we get Episcopalian, or the Episcopal Church. And again, let me give you a few verses on this. Acts chapter 20, verse 17 and 28. So Acts 20, verse 17 and verse 28. Philippians 1:1, 1 Timothy 3, 1 and 2, 1 Timothy 5, 17 through 20, 1 Peter 5, 1 and 2, and Titus 1, 5 and 7. Let me repeat those quickly. Acts 20, 17 and Acts 20, verse 28, Philippians 1:1, 1 Timothy 3, 1 and 2, 1 Timothy 5, 17 through 20, 1 Peter 5, 1 and 2, and Titus 1, verses 5 through 7. So Paul borrowed this term to use when he was writing about the church and about leading the church. And in a Jewish context, he used the word elder more because they were familiar with the elders in the Old Testament, like I just said. When he was writing more to a Gentile group, he used the word overseer more, and when the group was more of a hybrid, he used both terms. Now, this idea of overseer also has the aspect of managing. And we find the need to manage well in 1 Thessalonians 5:12 and 1 Timothy 3, verses 4 and 5. Again, that's 1 Thessalonians 5:12 and 1 Timothy chapter 3, verses 4 and 5. So what Paul did is he linked the idea of an elder with someone who would manage, who would oversee not just the family well, but also would oversee the church well. And this term that is being used here by Paul is similar to the term that Jesus used when he was talking about the Great Samaritan who oversaw the care of the person who was robbed and beaten along the way, and also the same term that the Good Samaritan said to the innkeeper when he delivered the person to the innkeeper and said, "You manage and care for him until I return, and then I will take care of the bill." So these terms are all interrelated in some way, shape, or form. And then a final term that is used is the idea of shepherding. Now, this term is not used very often either in the New Testament, much more common in the Old Testament, but we see this in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 7, out of order, sorry, Acts chapter 20, verses 28 through 30, and 1 Peter 5, 1 through 4. So again, shepherding is in 1 Corinthians 9, verse 7, Acts 20, 28 through 30, and 1 Peter 5, 1 through 4. Now, to clarify, in Ephesians chapter 4, Paul says that some are called, some are gifted to be pastors and shepherds, pastors and teachers. But to be an elder, that is not a gift that God necessarily gives us. It's a calling that He might put upon us, but it's not a gift per se. In fact, as we see in 1 Timothy chapter 3, 1 and 2, anybody can aspire to become an elder. And I'll talk more about that in a subsequent video. But in Romans 12:8, it talks about the idea of leading and managing well as a gift. But in Ephesians chapter 2, verses 19 and 20, we have a giftedness of those who were there to build the church. But anyone who is called by God and meets the qualifications given by God, 1 Timothy 3, 1 through 7, and Titus 1, 5 through 9, anybody can aspire to be an elder. Doesn't mean they will be an elder, doesn't mean they should be an elder. But if they meet the qualifications and they develop themselves properly, then absolutely. So it is not limited to a giftedness, but God has gifted certain people specifically to be elders of a church. So again, this short video was just to kind of bring some terms together and to show that the New Testament uses terms such as elder and overseer and shepherd and leader, all of those as in a similar way. So the pastor of a church, the elder of a church, the elders of a church, which was yesterday's video, those are some of the responsibilities that we are to have as we not only care for the people, but we care for the ministry under the lordship of Jesus Christ.